So you're diving into Module 25, Chapter 3 of ISO 14001-2026, and you're probably wondering, how exactly do lead auditors move beyond a basic, boring checklist to evaluate true, leadership-driven environmental planning? Well, it takes a whole lot more than just checking off paperwork. Let's explore how auditors use Annex A.5 and A.6 concurrently as a literal lie detector test for corporate sustainability.
Look, anyone can check a box to say a policy is signed. Honestly, it's kind of like a New Year's resolution nobody actually intends to keep. But true strategic integration? Now that requires altering real operations, shifting resource allocation, and actually putting money where your mouth is. That's the difference between a static piece of paper and a dynamic system that actually evolves.
Think of yourself as an investigator here. How do you expose the illusion of a superficial environmental management system? If a company claims they absolutely love sustainability, how do you know it's not just some generic template they downloaded from the internet? You have to trace the footprints from the boardroom directly down to the factory floor.
All right, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. Beyond paper compliance. 2. Annex A5, leadership. 3. Annex A6, risk-based planning. 4. Synthesizing A5 and A6. 5. Tracing evidence. And finally, 6. Defensible findings.
Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, Beyond Superficial Paper Compliance.
At the heart of this is leadership-driven planning. This is the crucial anchor concept. It means you have strategic alignment where leadership intent actually translates into actionable, risk-based environmental objectives and real resource allocation. It isn't just a procedural exercise. It proves that environmental considerations are totally hardwired into the organization's broader strategic priorities.
Moving on to Section 2, Annex R.5, Leadership Accountability.
Annex A5 is really all about the who and the why. It demands strategic alignment with the business context, executive resource allocation, integration into core business processes, and highly visible performance accountability. Essentially, leadership can't just sign a policy and ghost you. They have to integrate environmental objectives into things like major capital investments and procurement. The standard specifically states, leadership commitment is evidenced not only through statements of intent, but through observable organizational alignment between environmental objectives and business strategy. What does that mean for us? It means you are looking for their fingerprints on everyday corporate governance. If they plan a facility expansion, leadership better ensure emissions are assessed during that financial decision.
That brings us to Section 3, Annex A.6, Risk-Based Planning.
Now, A6 shifts our lens entirely to the what and the how. It's a structured four-step methodology. First, identify environmental aspects. Second, evaluate the risks and opportunities. Third, establish measurable objectives. And fourth, develop those concrete operational action plans to actually fix them.
Let's put this into perspective. Say you're looking at a chemical manufacturer, and their significant aspects are 50% air emissions, like nitrogen oxides, 30% hazardous waste, and 20% water consumption. If their main environmental objective is suddenly just office paper recycling, yeah, no way. You know instantly their planning is a complete sham, ignoring their highest risks.
All right, Section 4, Synthesizing Leadership-Driven Planning.
This is where the magic happens. We're using Annex A5 and A6 concurrently. Just look at how they matrix together. If A5 shows a leadership commitment to water conservation, allocating a budget, and integrating it into roles, but over in A6, they haven't identified water scarcity as a risk, haven't set a 15% target, and aren't redesigning cooling processes, the audit trail is completely broken. Intent has to perfectly match execution.
This dual-lens synthesis is your ultimate tool. By evaluating governance intent from A5 concurrently with operational execution from A6, you expose that superficial compliance. Annex A5 emphasizes the governance responsibility, while A6 dictates the operational methodology. Together, they form an incredible lie detector test.
Let's flip to Section 5, Tracing the Audit Evidence.
So when a logistics company says they want to reduce emissions, you don't want vague promises. You want to see a hard number, like a 15% reduction goal. That metric needs to be backed by a solid A.6 action plan, baseline data, and a concrete timeline to prove this whole thing actually has teeth. And a healthy audit trail should bounce seamlessly over time. Think of it like this. Quarter 1, leadership signs the emissions policy. That's A5. Quarter 2, fleet emissions are flagged as a high risk. That's A6. By quarter 3, the board actually approves an EV budget. Back to A5, and in quarter 4, that 15% EV deployment begins, A6 execution. It is a dynamic, perfect loop of commitment and action.
Finally, Section 6, writing defensible audit findings.
When that trail inevitably breaks down, how do you document it? Well, a weak finding just says, no environmental objective document exists. Kind of weak, right? A strong, defensible finding says, leadership failed to integrate emission risks into strategic planning, preventing objective achievement. See the difference? You're targeting systemic governance failures at the leadership level, not just pointing out a missing piece of paper. That would stand scrutiny.
You're going to see some very common 8.5 and 8.6 nonconformances. Objectives that just maintain the status quo. Risk assessments getting completely ignored during planning. Massive disconnects between policy and resource allocation, or leadership just being totally absent from review processes. These are major red flags, proving the system is totally isolated from the core business strategy.
So, as we wrap up this explainer on Module 25, Chapter 3, I want to leave you with this. Is your organization's planning merely procedural, or is it truly leadership-driven? Are you just checking boxes, or are boardroom commitments actively shaping what happens on the floor? Grab that dual lens of Annex A5 and A6 and ask yourself, is your environmental planning built to drive real impact, or is it just an elaborate illusion?